Well, 42% of Americans approve of President Joe Biden, according to the latest Gallup poll. This is down from 57% this time last year. Joining us live now is our political analyst and professor at Curtin University, Joe Siracusa. What's the drop down to, Joe?
Good morning, Pete. Well, look, the president is losing numbers everywhere. Only 4 in 10 Americans approve of what he's doing. So the opposite of that is 6 in 10 don't approve of what he's doing. But more than that, 71% of Americans think America's going in the wrong direction. President's got all kinds of problems, of course, here. Inflation, the economy, education, and crime. And look, Pete, he isn't going to get any credit for bringing the Russian-Ukrainian war to an end or to a ceasefire or anything. He's running into all kinds of problems because he can't claim too much credit without becoming a co-combatant. I read this morning in the New York Times that getting those MiGs from Poland are still on the table. The president's going to be doing something about bringing Soviet-made tanks to Ukraine. So the United States is getting a little closer each time. And look, the press and others have written off President Putin. I wouldn't do that too quickly, as a matter of fact. He's regrouping after he's pretty much wrecked a great deal of Ukraine. And keep in mind, 1 in 4 Ukrainians is either displaced or living somewhere else, living in another country. So, he's already done a job there. And the other thing, too, is these sanctions, everyone says they're working very well. I don't see it that way. India's not buying into the sanctions. China's not buying into the sanctions. So a number of other smaller nations in Africa aren't buying into it. And, of course, on Saturday, Australia signed a major free trade agreement with India, which is not interested in sanctions. So it shows you that each country goes along its own way. I reckon that by November, the president of the United States will have lost both the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and he will be history. So it could be that at the end of the day, Putin will survive Joe Biden.
Contaminated soil from the Chernobyl nuclear exclusion zone may have spread as far as Ukraine's capital of Kiev. According to Ukrainian forces, Russian troops dug into the soil, and it's feared tanks rolling through the area could have carried contaminated earth right across the country.
It is one of the most dangerous places on Earth, but that didn't stop Russia pouring troops and tanks into the Chernobyl exclusion zone at the start of the war, patrolling the site of the 1986 nuclear disaster, while infantry dug in the poisoned earth nearby, say Ukrainians who've now retaken the site.
There were quite a lot of trenches, and they were digging trenches in many different places. But I understand that the most dangerous place was the redwood because that's where nuclear waste is buried.
People visiting Chernobyl like we did before the invasion are told to touch nothing, let alone dig. The soil is still steeped in radiation. Making matters worse, say Ukrainians, the Russian soldiers were given out-of-date radiation monitoring equipment. Since Chernobyl's reactor exploded in 1986, access to the area has been tightly controlled. But Ukrainians say thousands of Russian military vehicles rolled through here, picking up contaminated soil dug up by the soldiers.
We are talking about 30 to 60 kilometers around the Chernobyl station, and that area is heavily contaminated. In this one location, in 5 days, 10,000 Russian vehicles crossed this point on their way out from Ukraine into Belarus.
Contamination could have been carried into Kyiv, Belarus and Russia. Chernobyl's poisonous legacy, buried for decades, unearthed and potentially dispersed far and wide.
The United Nations General Assembly has voted to suspend Russia from its Human Rights Council after allegations of war crimes outside Ukraine's capital. The resolution achieved the two-thirds majority of those voting. 93 votes were in favour, 24 against, 58 abstentions. China, Iran and Syria were among those countries who voted against the resolution. Russia has hit out at the US after its ambassador launched the effort to suspend Moscow.
What we're seeing today is an attempt by the United States to maintain its dominant position and total control, to continue its attempt at human rights colonialism in international relations.
Russia's deputy ambassador to the United Nations has called on member states to reject the resolution, saying it would set a dangerous precedent. Moscow is the first permanent member to have its membership revoked from the UN body. An investigation has been launched after sensitive emails containing details of protocols surrounding the Queen's death. And they were accidentally leaked by the Welsh Government. The email contained a letter from a civil servant which outlined concerns about a news organisation having confidential information about the plans. The conversation, which was marked as officially sensitive, was sent to multiple people internally and to a former employee. The Welsh Government says the email did not contain any operational information. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has tested positive for COVID. She's fully vaccinated and is currently asymptomatic, according to a spokesman. She appeared unmasked at a White House event on Wednesday with the president. The 82-year-old Democrat has cancelled her weekly press appearance and postponed a planned trip to Asia. Tesla's CEO, Elon Musk, is Twitter's biggest shareholder after acquiring a 9.2% stake in the social media platform. Musk's stake is currently worth an estimated 2.9 billion American dollars. That equals about 4 billion Australian dollars. Twitter shares are soaring 25% in pre-market trading in response to that transaction. Well, MPs in Pakistan have rejected holding a motion of no confidence in Prime Minister Imran Khan. The country's parliament has now been dissolved, setting the stage for fresh elections due to be held in 90 days.
While the government celebrated, the opposition sat back in their seats, visibly taken aback and dejected.
It's essential a no-confidence motion is constitutional. I reject this resolution.
They'd called for a no-confidence vote, blaming Prime Minister Imran Khan for the steep rise in inflation and what they call his anti-Western foreign policy. Within minutes of the Deputy Speaker's shock announcement, Imran Khan made a televised national address.
Now that the Speaker has exercised his constitutional power, I have advised the President to dissolve the Assembly so that democracy prevails. In a democratic society, we conduct elections so that the public choose who they want to lead their country.
The President obliged. Dramatic scenes in the National Assembly, a fitting climax for this political crisis.
In the run-up to this vote, we've had revelations of a plot to assassinate Imran Khan and an expose on alleged collusion between opposition MPs and a foreign country he accidentally named as the United States to intervene in Pakistan's politics and oust him through this vote of no confidence. And that's what the Speaker cited when rejecting today's vote.
Shame, shame, claimed Imran's party. The opposition says these allegations are baseless and it's Imran Khan who is acting unconstitutionally in a desperate bid to hold on to power.
Ukraine's president has visited the town of Bucha outside Kiev, where hundreds of civilians were found dead in mass graves. Volodymyr Zelensky claimed the deaths constituted genocide and war crimes by Russian troops. President Zelensky warned Russia evidence of such atrocities makes it hard to conduct peace talks with Russia.
The longer Russia delays the talks, the worse it is for them and for this situation and for this war. Because every day when our troops walk in and deoccupy certain territories, you see what's going on. It's very difficult to conduct negotiations when you see what they did here.
Australian fighter jets and naval ships will soon be equipped with long-range missiles under a $3.5 billion weapons deal to be announced by the Defence Minister Peter Dutton in a few hours' time. Under the arrangement, the US defence manufacturers Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, Australia's Super Hornets, will be armed with missiles capable of a 900-kilometre range by 2024. Hobart-class destroyers and Anzac frigates will be armed with Norwegian-made missiles in 2024. That's 5 years ahead of schedule. New high-tech sea mines will also be provided to the Navy, 3 years ahead of schedule. The two American companies will manufacture some missiles for the ADF in Australia while providing an alternate supply and a supply chain for the US. The Defence Minister says the early acquisition of these weapons will allow the ADF to fend off a broad range of threats.